Unaware her poor mother left her a 50B trust fund, Mara Whitfield sat in silence as her husband divorced her for being too cheap and bragged he was leaving to marry a model. But deep inside a private bank, a vault opening was already scheduled with her name on it, and the bank manager had been waiting years to reveal what would make that man freeze. Mara wasn't flashy, not because she didn't dream, but because her mother trained her to survive quietly, stretching groceries, hiding pain behind calm eyes, and repeating one strange rule: never tell anyone what you might have. Damon, her husband, used to call it humility until success made him cruel, and humility became the excuse he used to humiliate her. Now he calls her cheap, signs the divorce like she's disposable, and walks off with a smug smile toward a woman whose beauty looks like status, while Mara, grieving and confused, holds a small old key her mother hid for years, not knowing what it unlocks. But why would a poor mother leave a $50 billion trust fund and seal it behind a vault? Why would a bank manager personally demand Mara's presence for the vault opening? And what exactly is he about to reveal that will leave her ex-husband paralyzed? Not with fear for Mara, but with fear for himself? Mara Whitfield learned early how to make herself smaller without disappearing. She did it in the kitchen that morning, standing across from Damon as sunlight spilled over the counter they once picked together. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The divorce papers lay between them like a verdict already decided. "You don't even notice how embarrassing it is," Damon said, straightening his cufflinks. "You act like money is something to hide." Mara stared at the papers, not the words. She already knew what they said. What she felt was heavier, the quiet certainty that he'd rehearsed this moment long before today. "I cook at home. I reuse things. I don't spend recklessly," she said carefully. "That doesn't make me cheap." Damon laughed, sharp and dismissive. "That's exactly what it makes you." He leaned back, confidence settling into him like a tailored suit. "I'm marrying someone who understands image, someone who doesn't flinch at luxury." Mara's throat tightened. "You mean the model?" He didn't deny it. That was the moment something inside her shifted. Not anger, not panic, but a hollow calm. The same calm she'd learned watching her mother stretch meals, smile politely, and never explain herself to anyone. A memory flashed like a quick cut. Evelyn Carter in their old apartment, a thin woman in a faded cardigan, counting coins on the table without shame, then sliding them into a jar labeled rent with careful hands. Mara had been a child, hungry and embarrassed, and her mother had leaned close, voice firm but soft. "Never tell anyone what you don't have," Evelyn had whispered, eyes scanning the room as if walls could listen. "And never tell anyone what you might have." Back in the kitchen, Damon's phone buzzed once. He didn't hide the screen. A name glowed there, Kendra, followed by a heart emoji. Damon's mouth tilted with the kind of pride that didn't belong in a marriage. "You see?" he said, tapping the phone lightly. "That's what I mean. She gets it." Mara swallowed the sting and tried to ground herself in logic, in dignity, in the belief that love could be reasoned with. "So all the years I stood by you, all the nights I ate noodles so you could save for your big break, that was nothing?" Damon's eyes flickered, just a fraction, then hardened again, as if the truth was inconvenient. "Don't dramatize. I gave you a life." Mara almost laughed at the irony because the life he gave her looked exactly like the life she'd already survived before him. She remembered Damon in their early years wearing cheap suits, dreaming loudly, clenching his jaw whenever someone richer walked past. He had married her when she was easy to control, quiet, grateful, and trained by poverty to accept less without complaint. A second memory stabbed in, small but sharp. Damon once opening her handbag in the first year of marriage, teasing, "What's in here?" Snacks, coupons. Then pausing, eyes narrowing at an old metal key on her keyring. Mara had snatched it away quickly, flustered. Evelyn had given it to her for safekeeping, then told her to tuck it under the kitchen drawer. Mara never understood why it mattered. Damon had stared at the key just a second too long before laughing it off. Now Damon slid the papers forward and signed, the pen scratching like a blade. "Your poor mother raised you to think small," he said, almost casually. "And I can't live small anymore." Mara's chest tightened at the casual cruelty of it, how he used her mother's. Not poverty, like a weapon. Grief rose in her throat, hot and sudden, because Evelyn wasn't even gone long enough for the house to stop smelling faintly like her lavender soap, and Damon was already stepping over her memory like trash. Mara picked up the pen. Her hand trembled, not from fear, but from the strange feeling that this wasn't an ending. It was a door closing, somewhere far louder than this quiet kitchen. She signed, then set the pen down gently, because she could already feel it. Something unseen was moving. Not magic, not coincidence, something planned. Damon stood, smoothing his shirt. "I'll have my lawyer send the final paperwork," he said, already halfway out of the marriage with his tone. At the doorway, he looked back once, as if to confirm she was still small. Mara lifted her eyes. She didn't beg. She didn't scream. The silence unsettled him more than tears would have. He scoffed, then left. The door clicked shut. Mara stayed standing for a moment, staring at the counter where the papers lay. Then her gaze drifted to the kitchen drawer. Her mother's voice echoed again. "Never tell anyone what you might have." A slow, involuntary breath left Mara's body. She slid the drawer open. Her fingers moved like they remembered something her mind didn't. And under the drawer, taped where no one would think to look, was the old key. Cold, heavy, real. Mara held it in her palm, confused, heart pounding, a question forming in her chest like a storm, because in that moment, the kitchen didn't feel like a place where a marriage ended. It felt like the first frame of a larger story, one her poor mother had written in silence, and somewhere, deep inside a private bank, a vault opening was already waiting for her name. Mara didn't remember sitting down, but at some point she was on the edge of the couch with the divorce papers still on the kitchen counter, like a stain she couldn't scrub out. The house felt too quiet without Damon's footsteps, too wide, too empty, yet his last words still paced the rooms like a ghost. "Your poor mother raised you to think small." The key lay in her palm, cold enough to make her fingers ache. It wasn't new to her life, not really. It had lived under that drawer for years, like a secret heartbeat. But now that her mother was gone and her husband was gone, the key felt louder than any sound in the house. She turned it over, noticing tiny scratches along the teeth, as if it had been used many times. That didn't match Evelyn's poor life. Nothing about this key matched rent jars and noodles. A flashback hit her hard and fast. Evelyn standing at the window late at night, curtains barely cracked, watching the street like she was waiting for someone to pass. When Mara had asked what she was doing, Evelyn had smiled too quickly and said, "Just checking the world is still where it belongs." Mara had laughed then because she was 16 and didn't know fear could wear normal clothes. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mara stared at it until it stopped, then buzzed again immediately. Persistent, like whoever was calling refused to be ignored. Her chest tightened. This was how bad news arrived. Hospitals, funeral homes, lawyers. She answered, voice cautious. "Hello?" A man's voice came through, calm, polished, with the careful tone of someone trained to handle fragile things. "Ms. Mara Whitfield?" "Yes." "This is Jonathan Reeves, managing director at Westbridge Private Bank." He paused, as if he expected her to misunderstand. "I'm calling regarding your late mother, Evelyn Carter." Mara's throat tightened at the sound of her mother's name spoken by a stranger in a voice that carried power. I'm handling her arrangements. If this is about medical bills." "It isn't," Jonathan said gently, cutting through her assumption with precision. "Ms. Whitfield, I need you to stay with me. Your mother established a trust fund in your name." Mara blinked, almost offended by the absurdity. "My mother was poor." Jonathan's next words were quiet, but they landed like thunder. "Your mother lived quietly. Those are not the same thing." Mara's grip on the phone tightened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he continued, "the trust is valued at $50 billion. For a second, Mara heard nothing. Not the hum of the refrigerator, not the traffic outside, not even her own breathing. The number didn't fit inside her mind. It had no place to land. 50? Her voice broke. "That's not possible." Jonathan didn't argue. He didn't rush her. He let the shock exist, like he'd seen it before. "There is a vault component that can only be accessed under specific legal conditions. Those conditions were met upon your mother's passing. We have scheduled the vault opening for tomorrow morning. You need to be present in person." Mara's eyes drifted to the key again, as if her body had known before her mind did. "A vault? Why would my mother? Tomorrow, Jonathan said, and something about that single word carried weight, like a door closing behind her and another opening ahead. Everything will be explained, but please, Ms. Whitfield, do not tell anyone, not friends, not family, not your husband. Mara's stomach dropped. My husband is divorcing me. Jonathan's pause was brief, but it was there, like a note of grim recognition. I understand. All the more reason to come alone. The call ended, and Mara sat frozen, phone still against her ear, listening to the dead line. $50 billion, vault opening, private bank. Her mother's name tied to a world Evelyn had never let Mara even look at. Mara stood, moving like she was underwater, and went to the bedroom where Evelyn's small suitcase still sat unopened, brought from the hospital, heavy with the final pieces of her mother's life. Mara had been too broken to go through it yet. She unzipped it slowly. Inside were neatly folded clothes, a worn paperback, and at the bottom, taped inside the lining, an envelope. Mara's breath caught. Evelyn's handwriting, not shaky, not weak. Strong strokes, commanding. Mara, if they call you, don't argue with them. Don't say no out of habit. Her throat tightened so hard it hurt. Tears blurred the page, but she wiped them away, desperate to read the rest. Go to the bank. Bring the key. And whatever happens next, remember what I taught you. People don't fear poverty. They fear what poverty can be hiding. Mara pressed the letter to her chest, grief splitting open into something else. Confusion, suspicion, the beginning of understanding. A new sound cut through it, her phone buzzing again. This time, a name she recognized. Damon. She stared at it until it stopped, then rang again, longer, more urgent, like he sensed something slipping out of his control. Mara didn't answer, but the third call came with a voicemail notification almost immediately, as if he couldn't wait even a minute. Her thumb hovered, then pressed play. Damon's voice filled the room, smooth and satisfied. Mara, I need you to sign a few additional documents. Routine. Also, a pause, then a smug breath, like he enjoyed the next part. Kendra and I are finalizing things. She's introducing me to people you can't imagine. This is what winning looks like. Don't make this messy. Mara's hands trembled, not with heartbreak this time, but with something colder. Because why now? Why would he suddenly need more signatures after walking out like she was nothing? Her eyes slid to Evelyn's letter again. People don't fear poverty. They fear what poverty can be hiding. Mara's mind replayed that old memory. Damon staring too long at the key on her ring, the way his eyes had narrowed, before he laughed it off, like he'd been measuring her, testing her, waiting. She deleted the voicemail without replying. Then she did something she'd never done in her marriage. She locked her phone, locked her doors, and made a decision without asking anyone's permission. Tomorrow, she would walk into the private bank alone, not as Damon's cheap wife, not as Evelyn's poor daughter, but as a woman holding a key her mother had hidden for a reason, heading toward a vault that could change everything. And somewhere inside that vault, Mara could feel it, was the truth about why her mother chose silence, and why Damon's cruelty felt less like an ending and more like a trap that had finally snapped shut. Mara barely slept. Every time her eyes closed, the number returned, 50 billion, too large to be real, too sharp to be a dream. She lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle, remembering Evelyn's last days in fragments. The hospital lights, the dry rasp of her mother's breath, the way Evelyn's fingers had squeezed Mara's hand once, harder than a sick woman should have been able to. Under the drawer, the key. When they call you, don't argue with them. That squeeze hadn't been a goodbye. It had been a handoff. By dawn, Mara was dressed in a simple black coat, hair tied back, the key and Evelyn's letter tucked into her bag like a heartbeat she couldn't set down. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw what Damon always saw, plain, quiet, forgettable. But there was something else in her eyes now, something steadier than pain. Outside, Westbridge Private Bank rose from the street like it didn't belong to ordinary people. Clean stone, dark glass, no flashy signs, just presence. The kind of building that didn't need to announce power because everyone who mattered already knew. Mara hesitated at the entrance as a security guard glanced up. His gaze was professional, scanning her coat, her hands, her face, then settling briefly on her eyes as if he sensed she didn't fully understand where she'd walked. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he asked. Mara's voice came out smaller than she wanted. I'm Mara Whitfield. I have an appointment." The guard didn't ask for a second explanation. He lifted a phone, spoke quietly, then stepped aside with unexpected respect. "They're expecting you." That phrase made Mara's stomach flip. "They're expecting you," like she'd been on a schedule for years. Inside, the lobby was silent in the way expensive places were silent. No clutter, no noise, just polished surfaces and controlled air. A woman in a tailored suit approached, posture straight, expression neutral, but not unkind. "Ms. Whitfield," she said, "Mr. Reeves will meet you personally." Mara followed her past a private elevator. No waiting area. No forms handed over casually. Everything about this felt rehearsed, deliberate. In the elevator, Mara stared at her reflection in the mirrored wall and flashed back without warning. Evelyn in the dry cleaning shop, standing behind the counter when a man in an expensive suit had walked in. Mara had been 12, sitting on a stool, swinging her legs. The man had spoken softly to Evelyn, and Evelyn had answered even softer, then glanced at Mara and stopped talking completely. Later, Evelyn had taken Mara's face in her hands and said, "Some people only speak nicely when they want something. Remember that." Mara's throat tightened as the elevator opened to a private floor with no obvious signage. Jonathan Reeves was waiting. He looked even more composed in person, mid-40s, controlled movements, eyes that measured risk the way normal people measured weather. "Ms. Whitfield," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, respectful. "Thank you for coming. I know this is overwhelming." Mara tried to keep her voice steady. "I think there's been a mistake." Jonathan's mouth didn't change, but something softened in his eyes. "There hasn't." He turned slightly, gesturing her down a corridor where two security doors sat back to back like a warning. "Before we proceed, I need to ask, did you tell anyone about this meeting?" "No," Mara said quickly. "You told me not to." Jonathan nodded once, satisfied, like she'd just passed a test she didn't know was happening. "Good." A lawyer appeared, then another staff member with a sealed folder. The air itself felt more serious. Mara stopped walking. "Why are there lawyers?" Jonathan didn't flinch. "Because your mother anticipated what happens when certain truths surface." Mara's heart thumped harder. "My mother, she was just—" Jonathan cut in gently but firmly, as if correcting a dangerous misunderstanding. "Your mother was not just anything." They entered a small conference room with a long table. On it sat a thick folder labeled in bold, "Carter Family Trust." Seeing Evelyn's last name printed like that, clean, official, made Mara's eyes sting. It didn't match the life she'd watched her mother live. It matched a different Evelyn, a hidden one. Jonathan slid a document toward Mara. "We need to verify your identity. Then we will proceed to the vault antechamber." Mara stared at the page, hands trembling. Why a vault? Why not an account transfer? Why does this feel like a movie? Jonathan's gaze held hers, and for a split second, the professional mask cracked just enough to show something beneath it. Respect. Maybe even sadness. "Because your mother didn't only leave money," he said quietly. "She left instructions. And protections." Mara swallowed. "Protections from what?" Jonathan didn't answer directly. He opened the folder and turned a page so Mara could see a section highlighted. "Your mother established conditions," he said. "Not for you, for the world around you, for anyone who tried to take advantage." Mara's stomach tightened. Take advantage? How? Jonathan studied her face like he was deciding how much truth her heart could take at once. Then he asked evenly, "Ms. Whitfield, has your husband filed for divorce?" The room felt like it tilted. "Yes," Mara whispered. "Yesterday." The lawyer beside Jonathan made a small note. The other staff member didn't react, but their stillness felt like confirmation. Jonathan nodded slowly, like a man watching a prediction come true. "Then your mother's safeguards are now fully active." Mara's chest tightened, panic and disbelief mixing. "Safeguards? Against Damon?" Jonathan didn't say Damon's name yet. He didn't need to. The silence did it for him. He pushed his chair back. "We're going to the vault now," he said. "And Ms. Whitfield, I need you to understand something before that door opens." Mara's voice shook. "What?" Jonathan's eyes didn't blink. "Once you see what's inside, you may realize your entire life was designed for one purpose." Mara's blood ran cold. What purpose? Jonathan stood, and his voice dropped lower. Careful, waited. To keep you alive, he said. Mara's breath caught, because suddenly she wasn't thinking about $50 billion. She was thinking about Evelyn watching the window at night. Evelyn's strange rules. Evelyn's fear that didn't match rent jars. And the way her mother squeezed her hand in the hospital, not like someone saying goodbye, but like someone handing her the last piece of a plan. Jonathan turned toward the security doors. "Bring your key," he said. Mara's fingers closed around the cold metal in her bag, and as she followed him toward the deepest part of the bank, a single terrifying thought began to form. What if Damon didn't leave because she was too cheap? What if he left because something he'd been waiting for was finally happening? The corridor beyond the second security door felt colder, quieter, like the bank itself was holding its breath. The lights were softer here, the walls thicker, the air cleaner in a way that made Mara feel like she didn't belong, like her footsteps were too human for a place built to protect secrets. Jonathan walked ahead with measured calm. Two security officers flanked them at a respectful distance. The lawyer and the notary followed, silent as shadows. No one chatted. No one smiled. This wasn't a tour. It was a procedure. Mara's bag strap cut into her shoulder as if to remind her she was still real, still standing, still not dreaming. Her fingers found the key again, rubbing the metal like prayer beads. They stopped at a circular steel door embedded in concrete, larger than any door Mara had seen in real life. It didn't look like something you opened with luck. It looked like something you opened with permission. Jonathan turned slightly. "Ms. Whitfield, please step forward." Mara did, heart hammering so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. Jonathan pointed to a slot on the panel. "Your key goes here." Mara's hand trembled as she inserted it. The metal clicked into place with a heavy, final sound that echoed down the corridor like a judge's gavel. Jonathan entered a code. The notary verified a seal. A security officer scanned a fingerprint. Another scanned an iris. The locks began to rotate, deep mechanical groans that made Mara's stomach tighten. Then the vault door moved, slowly, like something ancient waking up. As the gap widened, a rush of colder air spilled out, smelling faintly of metal and paper. Mara stared into the darkness beyond, expecting stacks of gold or rows of cash, like movies promised. But what she saw first was a framed photograph placed upright on a shelf like it mattered. More than money. Jonathan stepped in, reached for it carefully, and turned it toward Mara. Mara's breath stopped. It was Evelyn, young, radiant, dressed in a tailored suit, standing beside an older man whose face Mara recognized instantly from headlines and finance documentaries. A man whose name had been synonymous with wealth so extreme it shaped cities. Mara's knees weakened. "Who is that?" Jonathan's voice softened, but the words were brutal in their clarity. "That is your grandfather." Mara stared until her eyes burned. "My mother worked in a dry cleaning shop." Jonathan held her gaze. "Your mother built a new life, on purpose." He reached into the vault again and pulled out a bound stack of documents tied with red ribbon. He laid them on the table in the antechamber like evidence. "Your mother was born into wealth that attracted the wrong kind of attention," Jonathan said. "Threats, kidnapping attempts, people who wanted access more than they wanted her alive." Mara's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Jonathan continued, each line steady, each one a thread tying her childhood into a pattern that finally made sense. She disappeared under a new identity. She lived quietly, poor, because no one hunts billionaires in a two-bedroom walk-up. "Your upbringing wasn't neglect, Ms. Whitfield. It was camouflage." Mara's vision blurred. She whispered, broken. "So she lied to me my whole life?" The lawyer spoke gently, grounded. "She protected you your whole life." Jonathan opened the red ribbon documents. "This trust was established years ago. $50 billion placed beyond ordinary reach. But access was delayed until specific conditions were met. Your age, your mother's passing, and..." His eyes flicked to the lawyer. "Certain risk triggers." Mara swallowed hard. "Like what?" Jonathan didn't answer with a theory. He answered with a folder. He slid it across the table. The tab was typed, Damon Whitfield, background review. Mara's blood turned cold. "Why is my husband's name here?" Jonathan's expression tightened, professional again. "Because your mother instructed us to investigate anyone who married you." Mara's voice shook. "Years ago." Jonathan nodded once. Quietly, thoroughly. Mara stared at the folder as if it could bite. "What did you find?" Jonathan opened it and turned a photograph toward her. It was Damon, seated across from a man Mara didn't recognize, speaking intensely, passing something across the table. Jonathan didn't let Mara guess too long. He said it plainly. "That man is a private investigator," Jonathan said. "Your husband hired him." Mara's chest tightened until it hurt. "For what?" Jonathan's voice lowered. "To look for evidence that your mother was hiding wealth." Mara shook her head, disbelief cracking into rage. "No, Damon. Damon loved me." Jonathan didn't argue. He simply flipped to the next page. Dates, receipts, emails summarized by the bank's legal team. "Your husband began searching for signs of hidden money shortly after your engagement," Jonathan said. "He was careful. He never confronted your mother directly. He watched. He waited." Mara's mind flashed back. Damon staring at the key on her ring years ago. That fraction of a pause she never understood. Back then she'd thought it was curiosity. Now it looked like hunger. Jonathan turned another page. When nothing surfaced quickly enough, he grew resentful. That resentment became cruelty, and when his status began to rise at work, he chose the faster route. Mara's throat tightened. "Kendra," Jonathan nodded once. "A model who could boost his image immediately." Mara's hands shook over the table, the pain turning sharp, humiliating. "So I was, what? A test run?" Jonathan didn't soften it. He respected her too much to lie. "You were a strategy," he said quietly, "until you became inconvenient." The room went silent except for Mara's uneven breathing. Then Jonathan reached into the vault a final time and removed a sealed letter. He placed it in front of Mara like an offering. "This is from your mother," he said. "Only you can open it." Mara's fingers trembled as she broke the seal. Evelyn's handwriting stared back, strong strokes, alive with intention. Mara read, lips moving soundlessly at first, tears dropping onto the page. "My sweet girl, if you're reading this, the world finally showed its teeth. I'm sorry you had to see it, but I'm proud you stayed kind without becoming blind." Mara covered her mouth, shoulders shaking. Then she reached the final line. "Tell the bank manager the phrase, 'Open the second box.'" Mara looked up, breath caught. Jonathan, his eyes sharpened. "There's a second box?" Mara nodded, voice barely there. "My mother says, 'Open the second box.'" Jonathan turned back into the vault, reached deeper than before, and pulled out a small wooden box hidden behind folders, like it had been waiting for this exact moment. He set it down carefully, unlatching it. Inside was a single document with bold text, "Irrevocable Trust Control Transfer," plus protective orders, and beneath it, another folder. This one labeled "Damon Whitfield, Consequences." Jonathan Reeves stared at the contents for 2 long seconds. Then his face changed, like even he hadn't realized how far Evelyn Carter had gone. He looked at Mara, voice low, controlled, dangerous in its calm. "Ms. Whitfield," he said, swallowing once, "your mother didn't just protect you." He tapped the folder gently. "She arranged it so anyone who tried to use you would be exposed." Mara's heart slammed against her ribs. "How?" Jonathan slid 1 page forward. Legal triggers, automatic actions, audits, disclosures, and sealed statements ready to activate the moment a spouse abandoned her under false pretenses or tried to exploit her identity. And at the very bottom, in Evelyn's handwriting, was one final note. Let him think he left a cheap woman, until he learns what he really left. Mara's breath came out in a broken whisper. "He's going to find out." Jonathan nodded slowly. "Yes." And as if the universe wanted proof that Evelyn's plan was already unfolding, Mara's phone buzzed in her bag, vibrating hard, relentless. She pulled it out. Damon, calling again. Mara stared at his name, because now she understood. Damon wasn't calling out of love. He was calling because somewhere inside him, the predator had smelled blood, and the moment Mara answered, or didn't, would decide who controlled the rest of the story. Mara didn't answer Damon's call. She held the phone like it was a live wire, watching his name flash again and again until it stopped, then started over. Each vibration felt less like a husband reaching out and more like a thief rattling a locked door. Jonathan watched her quietly. "Do you want us to block the number?" he asked. Mara's throat tightened. "No," she whispered. "Let him show his face." Jonathan nodded once, understanding instantly. He didn't look surprised. He looked like a man who had read this ending years ago and was only waiting for the final lines to be spoken. In the antechamber, the lawyer explained the triggers again in plain terms. How Evelyn's safeguards were built to prevent manipulation. How the trust remained fully under Mara's control. How any attempt by Damon to pressure or defame her would activate disclosures and legal consequences that would touch his reputation, his career, his access. But Mara barely heard the legal language anymore. All she could see was her mother's handwriting. All she could hear was Evelyn's voice from childhood, steady and strange. Some people only speak nicely when they want something. Jonathan leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. Ms. Whitfield, there is a staff entrance and a private exit if you want to leave before— No, Mara said, and surprised herself with the firmness. She wiped her cheeks once, then straightened. I stayed silent my whole life because I thought silence was survival, but my mother didn't build this so I could keep hiding. Jonathan's eyes held hers with something like respect. Then you should know, he said. He's already coming. Mara blinked. What? Jonathan nodded toward a small security monitor on the wall. Its screen split into quiet camera angles. The lobby, the elevators, the front entrance. On the screen, Damon Whitfield stepped through the bank's glass doors like he owned the building. He wore his sharpest suit, dark, expensive-looking, tailored for dominance. His posture was confident, his smile rehearsed, the same smile he used when he wanted something and believed charm would unlock it. Beside him, Kendra Vale glided in on high heels, like the bank was just another photoshoot location. Sunglasses pushed up into her hair, lips slightly curled, eyes scanning the space, as if she expected people to recognize her. Damon leaned toward the receptionist, mouth moving quickly, hands gesturing. Even through the silent feed, Mara could read his energy. Entitlement dressed as politeness. The receptionist didn't smile. Security approached. Damon's shoulders tightened, Kendra's head tilted, annoyed, whispering something sharp into Damon's ear. He shook his head once, like relax. I've got this, then pulled out his phone. Mara's phone buzzed again in her hand. Damon. She didn't answer. On the monitor, Damon's smile slipped. Jonathan's voice was quiet beside her. He received an alert from his attorney. He said, Your presence here was leaked through the divorce process. He connected the dots. Faster than he expected to. Mara's stomach turned. So he really was watching. Jonathan didn't need to confirm. Damon was confirming it for him, in real time. The feed showed Damon pushing past the receptionist's desk with a forced laugh, trying to walk toward the private elevators. 2 security officers stepped in front of him, calm but immovable. Damon's mouth opened wide, angry now, no longer charming. Kendra threw her hands up, exasperated, then leaned in close, speaking fast. Her face said one thing clearly, Don't embarrass me. Damon stepped back, inhaled, reset himself. He tried a different mask. Victim. He pointed at his chest, palms open, pretending confusion. Then Jonathan Reeves appeared on the monitor, walking into the lobby like he'd been born there. Damon's face lit up with relief, like he thought Jonathan was an ally. Mara's heart pounded. She didn't realize she'd stepped closer to the screen until her shoulder nearly touched the wall. Jonathan in the lobby spoke first, calm and controlled. Damon responded animatedly, too animated. Even without sound, Mara could see the desperation leaking through his body language. And then it happened. Jonathan Reeves said one sentence. Damon's entire body went still, not stunned like a man hearing bad news. Paralyzed like a man seeing a cliff edge he didn't know was there. Kendra's expression shifted instantly. Her eyes widened. She grabbed Damon's arm, demanding answers, but Damon didn't move. His mouth opened, then closed again. His throat worked like he was trying to swallow something too big. On the monitor, Jonathan gestured toward security. Damon's knees weakened slightly. He braced himself on the edge of the receptionist's desk as if the floor had become unreliable. Mara's breath caught, because she knew what Jonathan had told him. She could almost hear it in her mind, the words that would freeze a man who measured people by what he could. Extract $50 billion. Kendra's face twisted, shock first, then calculation. She looked Damon up and down as if she was suddenly seeing him for what he was. Not a prize, but a man who chose wrong. She yanked her arm free. Damon reached for her desperately. One step too late. Kendra walked away, heels clicking sharp like a countdown, not even looking back. And Damon. Damon didn't chase her. He couldn't. He stood there shaking, trapped between humiliation and terror, staring at Jonathan Reeves as if the bank manager was the mouth of a god delivering punishment. Jonathan's voice came through the intercom on Mara's side now, soft but clear. "Ms. Whitfield, he's requesting to speak with you." Mara's chest tightened. A part of her wanted to run. Old Mara, the one trained to shrink. Another part wanted to scream. But the strongest part, Evelyn's part, was calm. Mara inhaled slowly, then turned away from the screen and looked at the vault door. Still open behind her like a new world waiting. She thought of her mother counting coins, watching windows, whispering rules. She thought of Damon laughing with Kendra, calling her cheap, calling her small, and she understood the most painful truth of all. Damon didn't break her by leaving. He revealed himself by leaving. Jonathan waited. "Do you want to see him?" Mara wiped her face once, then nodded, not because she needed Damon, but because she needed closure on her own terms. They brought Damon up to the private floor. When he walked in, he looked nothing like the man who had smirked in her kitchen. His suit was the same, but his confidence was gone, drained out of him like blood. His eyes flicked around the room, landing on the vault door behind Mara, then on the folders labeled with his name. His voice came out thin. "Mara." Mara didn't answer immediately. She'd let silence sit between them like truth. Damon took a step closer, hands half raised as if he wanted to touch her but didn't know if she'd allow it. "I didn't know," he said quickly. "I swear I didn't know. If I had known, I would never—" Mara's eyes narrowed slightly. "If you had known I had money, you wouldn't have divorced me?" Damon blinked, trapped. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. That silence was the confession. Mara's throat tightened with grief so sharp it was almost physical. Not grief for Damon, but grief for the years she tried to earn love from a man who only respected power. Kendra wasn't there anymore. Damon had been discarded the moment he stopped looking like a winning bet. Mara took one slow step forward. "You called me cheap," she said softly. "But it wasn't my spending you hated." Damon swallowed hard. "Mara, please." "You hated that I couldn't be used," Mara continued, voice steady, emotion burning behind it. "You hated that you couldn't pull luxury out of me like a slot machine. You didn't marry me because you loved me. You married me because you thought my mother was hiding something." Damon's face went gray. "That's not—" Mara lifted Evelyn's letter. "My mother knew," she whispered. "She knew what you were." Damon's knees looked unsteady again. "I made a mistake. I was confused. I was under pressure." Mara's eyes glistened, but her voice didn't shake. "No, Damon, you weren't under pressure." She gestured toward the vault. "You were just finally honest." Jonathan Reeves stood quietly to the side, like a witness to history, not a participant. The lawyer waited with documents, not to help Damon, but to protect Mara. Damon's hands trembled now. Can we fix this?" he whispered. "I can come back. I can—" Mara's tears spilled over, but she didn't wipe them immediately. She let him see the cost. "You don't come back because you love me," she said. "You come back because you're afraid." Damon flinched like she slapped him. Mara inhaled, and when she spoke again, her voice carried Evelyn's final lesson, quiet power. "My mother lived poor, so I could live safe," Mara said. "She left me $50 billion, but the real inheritance wasn't money." She looked Damon dead in the eye. It was the ability to see people clearly. Damon's mouth trembled. "Mara, please." Mara stepped back, creating distance like closing a door. "You divorced your wife for being too cheap to marry a model," she said softly. "Now you can go marry your image." Damon's breath hitched, eyes darting toward Jonathan. Tell her we can negotiate. Tell her." Jonathan didn't move, because this wasn't a negotiation, this was a consequence. Mara turned toward Jonathan. "Activate it," she said quietly. Damon froze. "What?" he whispered. The lawyer slid a document forward for Mara's signature, one clean stroke that would trigger Evelyn's prepared safeguards. The disclosures, the audit request tied to Damon's workplace ethics, the legal notice preventing harassment, and the separation of all future claims. Mara signed. Damon made a sound that wasn't a word, just a broken breath, like his body couldn't process the reality fast enough. He looked at Mara one last time, eyes wet now, voice cracking. You're really doing this?" Mara held his gaze, tears on her cheeks, but her spine unbent. "I'm not doing anything to you," she whispered. "I'm just not saving you from who you are." Security stepped forward gently. Damon didn't fight them. He couldn't. He walked out the same way he walked out of the marriage. But this time, there was no smug smile, no model, no victory, just a man leaving with nothing but the sound of his own choices behind him. When the door shut, Mara exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. Jonathan spoke softly. "Ms. Whitfield, are you all right?" Mara stared at her mother's letter, then at the vault, then finally at her own hands. She whispered through tears, I think I'm finally free." And deep inside Westbridge Private Bank, the vault door remained open, not as a symbol of money, but as proof that Evelyn Carter never raised a cheap daughter. She raised a daughter who could survive betrayal and still choose herself.